Hello everybody and welcome to the show. I'm here with Patrick Dixon again. We're doing show number 3. This is quite good. And Patrick and I have been talking about Steiner, Rudolf Steiner and spiritual science. So we wanted to discuss today various more aspects of Steiner. And I wanted to start with I am. Patrick, what is I am in the Steiner work?
Well, I mean, it's what it is within the world evolution. The I am really means the higher ego, and it's a stage in world evolution when individuality came really into focus. It stood out from the group, and which is part of the modern world. The problem is that the I am has also been sealed off from cosmic consciousness. So the danger of that is it can become flagrant egotism, which is in the extreme becomes what Steiner calls the war of the all against the all, when every other being is perceived as an enemy. Where in the real I am, you get your sense of self from how deeply you involve yourself and in others, in the other. And the history of the I am is mainly, this was the task of the Judaic stream, is to bring the I am, prepare the bodies to receive the divine incarnation, because the incarnation was really the template of the individual human being, and also eventually the cosmic, eternal individuality. Before that, there wasn't this crystalline perception of an earthly identity of the I in the way there is now, and the way it came down. And of course it started with sort of Abraham, really was the one who had this consciousness, was to prepare the thinking for that. And then it went through all the so-called patriarchs, which led the children of Israel, you could call the children of Israel, into the state where they would be able to receive this impulse of the divine incarnation into the blood. And it goes through Abraham, Noah, all these legends and Moses and Joshua, and it goes from the patriarchs into the kings, into the prophets, mainly that's the main trajectory. And that's what the Old Testament was. It's a preparation. Now people can say, oh, we don't like, the Moses, it's too much, thou shalt not. But actually that was necessary at that time. It's like a tree. Before it can bear fruit, it's got to grow up and become an individual identity. It has a strong bark. It's got to defend itself against external influences, the wrong kinds, breaking in on the sides so that it can carry up and bring down the full manifestation, which is what the whole Mosaic code was. Moses, in the burning bush, he saw the fire body that would become the egos of all humanity. That's what he was seeing. The I am. It's like everything. The cosmos gives us an archetype, and then it becomes the property of the whole earth. It multiplies, which is what it was. So the divine spark of the I am came down through the Judaic stream and fully manifested in the incarnation. And after that went into the 12 apostles, disciples, apostles, and then it spread out, and then the earth was able to receive it in a certain way. And it is sacred in the sense that it's, the individuality is this paradox. The divine is when the individual and the community are in a marriage that is sacred. It's this bride of Christ is really the ego, the I am, to the divine incarnation. So, and of course nowadays we've got this big movement against the patriarchy. We've got a big movement against that's the masculine, which is valid in a way, in a sense that we've now got to bring in both the masculine and the feminine on an equal level. But it's also wrong just to sort of say slay the patriarchy. That's a very narrow, rather stupid view, because actually all these states we've come to, all the things we've developed, now it's also tied up with the mystery of technology. The history of technology has mainly been in the hands of the male, and there's a very good reason for that. In the initial stages of the division of the sexes, the body of the male was much more earthed. It was much more gravity bound, and it was harder. Even its skeletal-muscular system in the male is much more externalized. Everything is like levers and pulleys, and it's about physical external muscular strength. And that was because the male impulse was to go out, whereas the female impulse was to go in and up. So therefore, the reason for that is because the female was the vehicle to bring down cosmic forces into the earthly sphere. If it had been a male body is too wound up in gravity, it couldn't make that space. There's very profound reasons, and then the whole idea, you have the archetype of the cave. Cave is the place where the woman does the weaving and the pottery and all that stuff, and the male goes out and does most of the hunting. Now, of course, there were always exceptions, but dealing with archetypes, and the masculine is about piercing, it was about killing, it was about, which is also the impulse of the intellect. The intellect analyzes, it kills, it breaks, whereas the female was about weaving together, hence weaving, pottery, you make vessels which retain, hold water, and then you make fabrics which cover, and all that's a whole archetypal, those sort of things should be remembered. Of course, we have these big battles today because people always wanting to change their gender, because it is totally forgotten or not aware of the fact that we've all been all genders, and we will be in the future until these will be transcended altogether. So we don't get so uptight about where we are. We just say, well, I'm here now. I chose this originally for a good reason. I'm now going to make the most of it, rather than, I can't bear it, I've got to, and this all comes from a kind of, the fact is that the higher picture, the clearer, more coherent, holistic picture of the world has been shut off. So we are trapped in the paradigm of materialism, in the box, which says it knows what this is, it knows what that is, and this and that. Then people want to get out, and they want to use any way they possibly can to get out of it. But the I am is that part which is beyond this division altogether. It is the unifying principle. It is the divine power of the holistic impulse and purpose of the world as contained within the I am. And that's why also it's under attack, because there are forces that don't want the human being to wake up. Because in a way, the I am is like a seed. It needs the sun of divine cosmic wisdom to germinate it. And when it does, then it will realize its immortality. And when that happens, we will, as Steiner points out, once the stars spoke to us, they are silent now. Then when the I am is awakened and germinated, then the human higher self will speak to the stars in a new way. Then our consciousness will cross the threshold into the divine, the final frontier, across the after-death state, and we'll work with souls on the other side. And so therefore, the I am in its true sense is what brings about what I call the beginning of the end of death itself, the immortal consciousness.
So in a way, it's supposed to be a joining with the divine, because in Hebrew it's Aya, Asher, Aya, I am that I am. That's the divine saying that, and then we're embracing that into ourselves, and it should be developing ourselves. But with this last century, definitely things are getting corrupted.
Yeah.
And is that why we're bringing in now instead the not I but Christ in me? Because that seems quite different from I am.
Well, no, it is the same thing. It's just that's a different. With the I am, as it was coming down, you had the Mosaic law, which said if you don't make your vehicle in the right way, if you don't prepare it, then it's not going to come down. It's not going to be able to, or it will come down in a distorted way. But then the Christ shows the next level. I mean, what the Christ did was show how the I am not only is the right way of responding to all nature and the earth, but it is also the gateway to the immortality. It's the resurrected human being. That's what the resurrection was. Showed the true destiny of the I am. Before that, you had an inkling of the I am in the Old Testament. It was not completely in, but it was there in figures like Solomon, who said, all is vanity. And what he meant by that was that if you before the resurrection, in a sense, all knowledge, everything that had been gained in all civilizations, could all add up to nothing. You know, it's like it's the resurrection resurrected not just a human body, but it resurrected the whole of history. You know, that's, and all the mysteries that have been contained within it, and to lift it onto another level. So that was the monumental activity that went through that process. But, you know, with it, it's a two-edged sword, because the I am, when it's not inspired by the divine purpose, can become a truly demonic vehicle for the most extreme forms of egotism and all that goes with that, which is deception and everything else, which we can see examples of today.
Because I had noticed myself over the years, and doing research into various, let's say, cult leaders, if we look at it from a new age kind of point of view, a lot of them do seem to start off fine and wanting to help people, but somewhere along the way they become a bit corrupted, and then suddenly you hear all these stories of them, you know, rapes and seducing of students and things. So is that the kind of what you're talking about?
Yeah,
here?
I mean, there are many levels and degrees of corruption. I mean, where people get power, and it's often a throwback to earlier stages which were legitimate, when a leader became the representative before the individual ego had fully developed in human beings. Like with children, you know, the ego's not fully in there, so you have to lead them, you have to give them structure. Big mistake today is to try and treat children like adults, you know. But that's the more you disempower people, the more you infantilize people, that is destructive to the development of the I am, you know, which is to basically, when the soul comes down, you want to lead them towards the I am. I mean, this is also connected with the great mystery of the Jewish thing about you go from the mother and you cross the wilderness of childhood to the father, which is the father state, which is at 21. That's when the ego comes in. That's, you know, the sort of symbology of that. But it's, yeah.
Do you think also that with the, definitely in the last few years, again, we were talking about computers and transhumanism that's coming and things, again, that would be a corrupted version of the I am?
Oh yeah, I mean, that's a real Ahrimanic attack. I mean, that's, you know, the Luciferic beings can attack, they can create a sort of arrogant pride, I don't need anything, I'm a god, you know, which is, Ahrimanic beings will say, you know, nature is irrelevant, nature's a failure. Basically, we have to replace this with a machine which is much more clear, works better, and we can construct and do what we like with it. That's, you know, the idea of, and transhumanism can only work where the earth has already been very strongly permeated by Ahrimanic forces, which means, the materialistic paradigm, the so-called high priests of reality, which many of the scientists probably think they are, is that it's a massive spirit of denial. Basically, you deny there's any kind of super-physical dimensions. Everything's just purely physical, material. And if that belief penetrates deeply enough into human being, they have no other way to go in terms of change and towards transhumanism. That leads to that state. And it's, it's very, to argue with materialism is what we have to do. We have to show that it's, you know, I mean, I listened to a bit on the radio the other day about a humanist talking. It was so depressing. You know, it's just listening to this, I don't need this, it's all this, it's just this. And I thought to myself, yeah, but what happens when you get older and you start thinking? Are you basically saying that we come out of nowhere, suddenly we feel something, we have connections, we have talents, we have abilities, and then we go nowhere. We go nowhere. We go into the void again, and then another one comes. It's the same. It just goes on and on. It's utterly, desolatingly stupid. Basically.
It's like there's no evolution in there.
Yeah, there's nothing.
It's
just nothing, because you come, you get a bit of this, then you're done. That's it. Goodbye. And then another one. It's just ridiculous, you know. And you think about, and we know all the processes that go on, even just in the physical, what is inherited, you know, passes on, you know, and things, you know, develop. I mean, it's this real power of the Ahrimanic that's worked on people's brains, and it's probably frozen aspects of the brain, not enabling any kind of new kind of light to enter. You know, this also tied up with this idea that the brain is the era of modern neurology. The brain is a structure anatomy and a biochemistry out of which consciousness emerges. That is utter materialism. Whereas, we said it before, it's like saying the radio set produces the programs that come out of it. It's like, whereas the brain is actually a receiver and transmitter, and is actually formed by consciousness. It's shaped, in all these areas, so, and it's these arguments, this whole materialistic paradigm has to be opened up, because it's the most, and will be the most destructive thing, because it will force people into certain forms of behavior. Because it's cut them off from developing the truth. It's committed a greater crime than physical murder when you actually murder the true potential of another with deception. So
not letting them to think and feel.
Yeah, you've said this is all there is. That's all. Don't think those things. They're rubbish. They're superstition. This is what you've got to work with. This is it. This is all you've got. That's what they're saying. It's a denial and a truncation of the potential of the human being. And of course, and I listened to this program, it was so depressed, somebody said it was all, I don't know, listen to any superstitions. It's talking about all that existed in all the great spiritual cultures. Humanism this rationalism is so stuck. It's on this little plateau of rationalism, where it looks back and looks back and looks down. It thinks it's looking down. All the things of the past are just superstitions, and here we are, we've arrived at this wonderful, but it's a complete blindness, because actually there is a thing beyond rationalism. It's what I call supra-rational. When that opens up, it'll show that this rationalistic stroke materialistic reductionism, it'll show what an empty, qualityless concept it is, really.
Well, I often wonder if these people are they don't want to open their minds and look further, or open their hearts, because they're worried about being laughed at or ridiculed.
Yeah.
But then that is part of rationality, isn't it?
Yeah, well, that's one thing. I think that's one, yes. People are afraid, because you will, you do get laughed at, you do get jeered. Aram is very good at putting mockery into people's minds and words, but that's one. The other one is, in the terms of the authority of science, is that they don't like to think that there's anything above and beyond them. They'll talk about possibly there might be advanced civilizations, but that's not the same thing as saying that I was created, I have been, my body, I didn't make it, I didn't make all these things in nature. But it's all by chance, it's like, because they can't bear the idea that there might be something that knows more than they do. You know what I mean? Or rather, it's on the right way, that our science is the way of knowing everything, and it's saying, and everything is, that's it, is everything, not every being. So they're sort of fixated on that.
Well, this is why Steiner was calling anthroposophy spiritual science, isn't it? We're trying to put the spiritual into the scientific, and using heart thinking and such like to see the whole picture.
Yeah. It's really, it's bringing the clarity. It's the idea that this is the problem with the orthodox religions, is you see, you're not allowed to think about the spirit, really. You just have to take what the doctrine says, which is also the same, another kind of reductionism. Whereas, what someone like Steiner was saying is that this is an infinite, that we've got to move towards sharing knowledge about things that once we could not know, but we now are on the brink of being co-participators and co-creators, of consciously working with other levels of existence, and the people who are stuck in materialism pride themselves on being rational and being, all this other stuff is illogical, but it's actually not. That's their blindness, and one's got to find ways of showing that, because the real spiritual science will lead on to a new art, a new medicine, a new agriculture on every level. And the most important thing is a deep internal purpose will exist in human beings, which will go way beyond, that will really cohere human psyche into a whole level. Many illnesses will disappear because of that when that comes, So.
Well, that kind of going back to the show you were saying you were listening to, that man that was talking about, well, he doesn't have that understanding of having more of a deep purpose to his life. The guy that was talking about this is it.
Yeah. It's all sort of, you find yourself, and then of course, in one certain extent, they're freeing themselves from old dogmas, and they've been brought up in rather narrow cultures, and which is valid. But then, they fall into another one. Humanism is Ahriman's sort of tepid, vapid, insipid poison. It's like a sweet tasting, but it's got no depth at all. It's just, we're here, this is what we do. And I say, but what do you mean by you? Do you know what you are? Do you know what nature is? Do you know? No, you don't. What do you know what I mean? It's almost like they think they know. They found out, now no, this is it. It's, but under that, there is a complete fear.
Yes, fear.
That's it. That's why they've adopted that view.
But is that Ahriman putting that fear?
Yeah, Ahriman puts the fear in, and then offers the ointment to, take away the fear, or the pill that takes it away. Is his view, his version of reality. He gives human beings the illusion that it's a kind of comfortable, and it explains everything, and you don't have to worry about, all this other stuff. But actually, if you take Ahriman's pill, eventually you'll be completely wired up. You'll be owned by companies, all that stuff. That would be a true nightmare. Whereas, most people are in that. They have no conception of how that would go. Because they're freeing themselves from what they perceive as the nightmare of the old diktats of religion, and, which on one way is valid. One has to do that. We have to go beyond those. But we, don't make the mistake of moving away from Lucifer and falling into Ahriman's lap. So, yeah.
Because you were saying about Ahriman giving us technology and things. Wherever Ahriman is, if he's in another realm or something, do they have some kind of technology of their own that they're trying to make us replicate? Or
well, what they want to do is they want to really gradually transform the human being into a machine, in the sense that they can control it from the outside. Whereas the true spiritual development is to ever increase the mastery of the self, and the self, the true self, is a microcosm of all that's in the macrocosm. And when you master it, you're then able to live within the macrocosm as well. I mean, when we die, we go into them, and our microcosmic aspect partly becomes macrocosmic. These are great mysteries which will more and more unfold. Ahriman wants to create a separate universe, which is, he controls with his own powers, which are really, to a certain extent, the fallen forces, the electricity, magnetism, all those forces are what's happened to the etheric forces on the earth for various separations. I mean, the history of electricity is a huge subject, what that really means. And most of our society, everything we use has been dug up. All the materials have been dug up from the earth, and that's not only the fossil fuels, but all the substances we've made into manufactured, and then electricity itself is a kind of fossilized light, a kind of decayed light, a gravity-bound light, which has also been lifted up. I mean, electricity is really, even if you look at the orthodox scientific view, is generated when you take the electron off the proton, off the given structure of the universal structure in the atom. When you strip the electron off, you separate it, and then the electrons start working on their own. You can then conduct them. And what that means is that you've taken that which is cosmically given in the cosmic atom, and you've taken it apart, but not given back in a transmuted form what has been given in completeness. You then separate it out, and you're saying, you can't have it, we're going to use it for our own purposes, short-term purposes. That's what it's about. I mean, so electricity, the internet is a kind of short-term, premature manifestation of, the development of the soul, where new clairvoyance, telepathy, all these things will arise in a way which is way beyond the present human, even imagination. But, what the whole danger, and also with atomic energy, is that they've taken powers which eventually, through the inner development of the human being, will be transmuted into something beyond creative power within the parlance of the divine humanity. But they've taken it, separated out, and basically saying, this is something that's been given, these are cosmic forces, we'll have them now. but we want them for this purpose. This is this. We don't care about the cosmic plan. So they're all, you take anything and you separate it from the cosmic plan, you create something that will serve Ahriman, something that will be dangerous, and in a way it has been inevitable, and that's why the Christ being came, in spite of what Ahriman's done. The Christ working within us is that which enables us to, in spite of all this short-term stuff that's been stolen away from the cosmic plan, can be reactivated in it, can be resurrected. But that's from the inner work of the human being. But to understand how that, they took the sun forces that are connected in the earth, and that's with the atomic energies. And even this digging up of minerals, really, you could say the gold rush in America, south and north, the indigenous wisdom would say, if you wait, the gold will rise up through the plants into the human being, into the crown chakra. It will, the gold that has become frozen down, solidified sunlight, will de-solidify through the inner development of the human being. It'll be carried up. But instead, we don't care about that. We're not just in cosmic. Let's grab it now. And that's everything, about everything. And of course, that's in all of us as well, to a certain extent. But, to understand the big picture.
But we must be able to feel that in gold, because everybody loves a bit of gold, don't they? Gold jewellery people want to buy.
It's a very powerful thing, and that's why people, in the crowns of kings. And that was really the idea that, the circle, the sun makes a circle in its movement, which is really forms the crown, which becomes the crown chakra, which then is mineralized metallized into an actual crown, which does also endow power. So if you have particular crystals in a golden crown, you could have 12 different. That does give a certain power, but that has to be in a sense, truly realized from within.
So it's kind of also why we had the word coronet, because they're wearing that crown of sunlight.
Yeah, absolutely. The crown is very symbolic. In a way, the crown chakra, it's almost like we've been denied the crown chakra when we come down on the earth. It's almost like educated out of us. That's shut down, because what the crown chakra represents is earthly awareness of cosmic consciousness. And of course, our whole modern science denies cosmic consciousness. So it's really in that attempt to deactivate, nullify the crown chakra, what that means. And if you can do that, then you can get on to all the other chakras and use them for other purposes.
Because I've always been very into these stories of the Sun Kings, which is, again, something Steiner talks about a lot. Maybe we could just chat a bit about Sun Kings, what that relevance is of being a Sun King.
Well, there are the sun initiates, those beings who carry the sun impulse, which is really the major impulse of the earth evolution, because the sun carries world purpose into all manifestations of the earth, even into the trees, into the eyes of all creatures, the divine purpose. Even what you think about everyone who doesn't believe in anything, but everyone gets up in the morning, they do things, they feel will to do things. That's because this power is working in them. The sun doesn't even produce heat and light in the way modern science talks about it. It actually is metamorphosed into heat and light when it hits the earth, or any earthly thing, any substance. It becomes what we call external warmth and external light. But really what the sun is bringing us the wisdom of the whole history of the cosmos through it, imbuing every day with purpose, in a sense. So it works in the world will, and it brings together all the impulses of all the planets, so it's a unifying principle. But of course, Steiner says something. He says that the sun is like negative density, which in a way it is. The pictures you get, like in the orthodox science pictures, these huge blazing thing, is actually a complete illusion. In a way, it's created by. It's almost like this is the. If you try to take things untransformed into that sphere, then you just get a blazing fire. You can't. It's like it changes from this love into the wrath. It's like a reflection of what we are doing, by this activity, and all the very distance of the sun and the stars, and is also an image of the distance we are from true spiritual awakening. So, and the activities they say happen in the sun and the stars is actually a materialistic image of what happens in the Atma, where the physical is totally spiritualized. And that in Ahrimanic terms is the, mass being changed into pure energy. So it's all Ahriman stuff, but it's all without soul. It's kind of accurate up to a point. It's seen purely as a thing, but it's a falsity as well, so, but it's very powerful, because we're dealing with a very powerful being, and the only way of countering that is a spiritual awareness. This is the Michaelic consciousness.
But it's not just us being affected by it, also all the elementals are, and everything that's in that. Because we were talking about machines just now, maybe we could talk about the elementals working in the machines.
Yeah, well, yes, of course. I mean, the history of machines also goes way back, but that's also going back partly to start with the male thing, the externalized body, from obviously the sexual, the skeletal-muscular system, which is much more about levers and pulleys and things like that, the muscles, the tendons, which then goes into the Archimedean thing about pulleys and all those things. That becomes, and that then also goes into the fuels, and that goes more into the feminine, really, like the wind and the water, the elements that actually can move the mechanistic principles, and then it goes into fire, and these all the elementals are getting more and more involved. When the mechanistic things are externalized, and then the elementals get caught up in these things, and then you think, well, what's the purpose of, say, something like a pump or whatever it is to raise? Most of the early technologies, interesting enough, were about raising things up, lifting things. You've got a wedge, you've got an inclined plane, you've got, levers of various kinds. It's all about lifting the fallen. And then you go into the water, the wind, the fire, and how the heat gets hotter, and then you can melt things more than you could. So you're gradually building up a kingdom which is becoming separate from its original thing, because the original elementals were working really in the plants and the animals and the weather and the literal elements, air, water, fire and earth, the particular movements. And gradually the human being starts to try to control this in a way. And this is what that's doing, is directing elementals in particular ways. And it's all right up to a point, and in fact they like it too up to a point. But then when you start bringing in electricity and those sort of things, you're actually forcing them into a position which is not their normal state. You're forcing them out of that. So
they're not comfortable in electricity?
Not really. No, I mean there are many elementals that are made Ahrimanic. They're not originally, but they've been forced into those positions. Even the geometries of certain architectures, where you have a lot of rectangles and squares, you're already forcing beings who want to take another form into a shape where you have endless industrial recapitulation, things made on an assembly line. You're also forcing out of the cosmic rhythms into this repetition, this noise, which you can see to a certain extent in some music, where it's just sort of endlessly repeated. There's no higher harmonic. Elementals are, they are originally they're preservers. What they do is they take the preserver's idea of the great archetypes of evolution, of bodies and organs and all these things connected to the planets, and they maintain it. Their task is to maintain it, maintain what the creators have brought down, until the human being become aware of them and then can take them a stage further. The elementals are waiting for us, because for their evolution to go forwards, ours must. I mean, what they are, they're the first children of the gods. So what we've done through our intellect and our materialistic intellect, we've caused a separation. So we separated the first children of the gods from their parents, and that's why, if it goes on, that will cause all kinds of ecological catastrophes, because instead of knowing how to transmute and realign these elementals to the higher beings, which would also help medicine and all sorts of things, we deny them their origin, and therefore we're also denying them their destiny.
That's really sad. That means we're ruining not just the earth, but other beings' way of living.
Yeah, of course. That's that. The thing is, that's the interesting thing is that human being has the key for the whole new creation, but also the whole new destruction as well. That is the two-edged sword that is in us. What we do, what we think, what we feel, what we will, has an effect, will have an effect on all manifestations. But, yeah.
I was going to say, how do we, working from Anthroposophy, how do we work with these elementals ourselves then, so that we get them back on track?
I think there are many ways of gradually approaching it, alteration of your consciousness. I think that, for instance, when you look at a structure like a building or like a wall, and then you have a sense that there are forces flowing downwards. These are kind of Ahrimanized forces working downwards. When you look at any living being, you're looking at those forces that are moving upwards mostly, upwards and outwards. And also, even if you're, say, traveling and you're looking out the country, if you look at a tree, you stretch your imagination to try and perceive internal movement. You don't just see an object with fixed things. You try to get your consciousness into what's actually going on. That here is something that may look like a noun, but is also a verb. All the time it's going through these processes. Trees are interesting because they mostly outlive us immensely. They carry nature memories in them, which is an extraordinary, if you can tune into that rhythm, you can begin to hear the deeper music. This is going on in nature. And there's also just trying to perceive what's going on within, to study the mood, try to see that in all living entities, you've got the outer form and you've got the inner forces, the fluids, and then you've got the idea that's the etheric, then you've got the astral, what's going in their perceptions, So to imagine, you see a lot of people and you try to imagine they're all coming from different places, they've all got different memories, they've all got different futures, they're all going to different places, they're just passing each other. And if you can really enrich your experience of what's happening, it will activate eventually the ability to work with the elementals, to see them, to really sense that,
So using a verb instead of a noun is like an action and keeps it all flowing, doesn't it?
Yeah. That's, of course, that in a way, that's the whole problem with modern scientific materialism. It's actually, to a certain extent, tried to force everything into what I call the noun fact mode, rather than the verb truth mode. The living, moving, changing. One has to always remember that every phenomena around us, particularly everything, will one day disappear. It will go on. That is not the ultimate reality, but we cling on desperately to those things. So it's to try to tune into the real eternal movement, eternal internal movement that's going on. So, and there are many ways of observing. You also, go through a whole day just concentrating on colours, or maybe just take one colour, and then you work on that, think about that, observe it, or then you just work on sounds. You just activate your senses in the consciousness. How many sounds have I heard today? What, recollection. Though all those things help one get into, a higher mode, a more active mode of consciousness, where the elementals are.
But doing these kind of exercises, which I think are very important, and I try and suggest to people, let's work on these kind of things. The elementals notice us doing it, and then perhaps will be working more with us because they can see we're
because they appreciate
light, but
because what they like is they like to enter into human consciousness, because it's the human consciousness that is the bridge to their origins, which is also their destiny, to their parents. Because in a way, Steiner points out that some of the elementals go in certain times of the year, they rise up into the oceans, and they rise up out into the hierarchies. And he says they're like nutrition. They like to be consumed. It's consummated into a higher beingness. In a way, we are ourselves kind of part of the internal organs and processes of higher universes. We are after we die, we go into, it's like we're changed into something. We pass through, you know, a kind of cosmosis process, which we go into other levels. And then this is so that we can come back renewed, a new whole. I mean, this sort of stuff is really going to become more and more and more apparent and revealed. You know, the huge cycles of transformation that we go through, but we need to think differently as well. You know, we also realize that what goes on inside the human body is a microcosmic image of the macrocosm. You know, and what goes on in the womb is a completely different from mainstream scientific view. You know, it's coming in from the whole universe. You know, it's like so, yeah.
Because I like to see it as okay, we're microcosms, but we are supposed to be fitting in with the macrocosm, and if we don't, we're kind of like nightmares for it. But if we do, then we're helping the flowing of the whole of the cosmos evolution.
Yeah. Paradoxical is if you surrender to the greater purpose, you're given back a greater sense of your true self. You know, that is the idea of when you love and you surrender. Love is the only thing that has victory in surrender. You know, so it's that's really the, yeah. So, you know, that's the mystery of the Christ. Give yourself or give yourself up, and you find yourself. You'll find yourself deeper and deeper, more and more, and give yourself. So it's a kind of eternal, you know.
Well, I know people struggle with this, and I was actually talking to a lady last week who came through my channel asking some questions. She understood the premise of all this love, but she had the difficulty of, oh, I've got to go through forgiveness, and that means that other person's right. So I was trying to explain, well, forgiveness isn't about saying that other person's right. Forgiveness is an actual stepping stone to the love, isn't it? But forgiveness is an important stage of it first, forgiving yourself and whoever's done whatever's wrong to you. But maybe we could explain a bit more of that from a Steiner point of view.
Yeah, I mean, forgiveness is really you are going beyond reaction. I mean, it's really the difference between reaction and response, you could say. A reaction is a sort of knee-jerk. Somebody does something, somebody hits you, you hit them back. It's just sort of like a, you know, reflex, which we all do. But a response is when you think, why did they do it? Is there something in me or something in them? You know, you just go deeper. You go far deeper into the causality of things, and that makes you more empathic and makes it possible for you to forgive, because, you know, you're not knowing the backstory, what makes a person do certain things, you know. So, and forgiving is not holding on to a resentment, but try to understand and have compassion. And then you're able to move on. It's not saying that you condone those things. You don't condone them, not in yourself and not in others. You can't. It's difficult to forgive somebody if they continue doing what, you know. That's not the same thing. It's something that's been done and you have done it. It's over. Yeah, we forgive you. But if somebody keeps on doing it, you can't. You've got to wait till they stop. You know, because that's.
You forgive them one day and then they do it again the next.
Oh yeah. You can't. Yeah. I mean, I get really angry. I get angry now at the world situation and people. I find very little compassion for some of these tyrants, you know.
Well, I think a lot of people are struggling with that. Again, I have a lot of emails about that kind of thing. How do I deal with what's going on in the outside world? So I try and encourage them just to work on themselves, but we still get caught up in what's happening in the outside world.
Yeah, absolutely. You've got to, keep working on within, keep holding on to this idea that he that is within is greater than he that is in the world, and that eventually we will develop the power to send forth forces of conscience across the earth, like in the ancient times the Erinyes, the Furies, did. And then the conscience became within us. That was the force that is within us through the Christ. The next level will be able to be ourselves able to literally pass the powers of conscience across the earth and bring about transformations, you know. But it needs a lot of development to do that.
And we're at sort of the early stages of that for when that comes in, what is it, the next epoch or something. So it's still a while off, but we're like are the seeds of getting that going.
We're purifying this force when it's really pure, and it's not about any kind of egotistical self-advancement, but it's for the sake of the good of the earth. Then when it really is that, then we will be able to be a power of conscience on the earth, which just by having, this idea of being able to perceive what's going on the other sides of the earth and participate in it, will happen. But it's, yeah, you're saying we're not ready for that really yet. But yeah.
Well, I'm just going to go back to when we was talking about the crowns,
Yeah.
because we've got dear old Charlie gets crowned in a few weeks on the
Yeah,
date
yeah.
that we're recording this.
Yeah, yeah.
Do you see any Steiner significance about him being crowned? He's been crowned on a eclipse day.
Yeah,
St.
yeah. No, I
George's.
mean, I think it's, yeah, it's very, it's sad. I mean, in a way, I mean, I feel he's a good soul. Deep down, he's a good man, and that's one reason why he's where he is. It's karma that it was, you know, people say, oh, we don't want a monarchy. I say, well, hang on a second. If you have an elected person, can you not see also that that's a gateway for corruption on a level which, you know, people can step on each other, and whereas the position he's in is that gets it. There's no hither or thither. You don't have to plot or anything to get that position, and it's just and it's not a position of unbridled power either. It's a symbolic thing really, and I think to a certain extent he does represent something of the soul of this folk that we're in, you know. And I think that's, I mean, there's also the old, you know, the royal flim-flam of all that stuff as well. You know, it gets, you know, there's a whole hunt and shoot and fishing, you know, all that thing. But I think him particularly has got a good impulse. You know, he's very into environmentalism. He's, you know, he's aware of the arts. He's a sensitive man. Whatever you think, and people sort of rail, and I think there's a lot of just basic envy and, you know, resentment. You know, yeah, they have money, but he can't do what he wants with his money, you know, and he's completely, you know, tied up into what he has to do. So I just think, on that level, he is the best possible person you could have there. You know, many other people, when you think of some of the people,
They could be,
yes.
yes.
A hell of a lot worse, you know. I mean, when you think of a lot of people in the government, they're all stepping on each other and stabbing each other in the back, you know. Mind you, I think he's got a family. This thing with Harry is really quite interesting. Because, I mean, one of the basic ideas, which seems pretty obvious, that Harry was the spawn of Hewitt.
Oh, yes, he even looks like it.
Yeah, absolutely.
So
Just know he's a completely different type, you know. Yeah, it's very sad, though.
But I was being reminded the other day that Charles used to be ridiculed when he was a prince, when I was a kid, in the papers all the time for talking to his plants. And I used to think, I talk to my plants.
Yeah, you know, he's ahead of his time.
Yeah.
He's much more in tune with that whole thing. He's you know, in Temenos. You know, Temenos is an organisation that, you know, only exists for the artistic who believe in a higher power. You know, he's definitely a profoundly, you know, deep down he's Christian, but he's also got this thing about, you know, interfaith, because that's a Christian impulse as well. You know, to be tolerant, to be, you know, people don't realise you're lucky to have a man of his moral status, really. I think, I don't, you know.
No, I agree with you on this. And I remember a couple of years ago I was showing some theosophists a video of where he's talking about his farms.
Yeah.
And they're biodynamic. He says
my
farms are biodynamic, which is part of Steiner's farming suggestions.
Yeah. I mean, one of the objections is, oh yeah, well he's got all that money, hasn't he? But no, what's he doing with it? He's doing good stuff. He earned the prince's trust. You know, he's done a lot of stuff. So I mean, you know, I just think when you think of the kind of, you look at the Saddam Hussein dynasty, and his son Uday, you know.
And he was the prince that was torturing everyone
and
enjoyed
absolute
it.
Nightmare, that guy. I mean, you know, Charles, I think he's the best possible person you could have. It's very difficult for him because he's got that age now, and he's, you know, been waiting for such a long time. I mean, even she had some really good impulse. She had a morality. You know, a lot of it was a bit outdated in certain senses, but it's still. You know, there was a great humanity in her. You know, there's no doubt about that.
She loved her trees.
Yeah.
The Queen we're talking about here, she. God rest her soul.
Yeah. So I mean, I think it's quite, you know, I'm quite happy with them remaining. You know, and I think actually it could be quite useful for the Anthroposophical Society to make, you know, if this was doing what it should do, he would have been here a long time ago. You know, we need to. It's almost like he needs this cosmological support now from these ideas, just as and then we would get something from that, you know. So I think that's.
Because I was wondering because he's royalty, would he have a different set of elementals working with him? They got a hierarchy. That's like the kingly elementals go and work with the kings and queens of the world, and us peasants get the peasant elementals.
Well,
Is that
no,
how
you
it
would.
works?
I think it. Well, I just think it would. That is a, it's something that could be tuned into. I think that's, that's where you redeem the inherited thing. The crown impulse. I think that those figures that are in the royal family have been. That was a karmic thing for them, that they were chosen to do that, and that's partly because of what their inner development was. They weren't. None of them were particularly. Andrew, of course, is a bit of an idiot. But I mean, they're not motivated. Their soul's not motivated by, the wrong kind of power. It's the opposite of these guys that fight themselves up like Putin from the slums and become. They just want to, step on everybody and be.
Because they're born, the royal family are born into it.
Yeah, they're born into it, so they don't have, and they're not, they know, and they choose it as a responsibility. Now, you can be, if you're born into it, you can also become terribly corrupt. You could do that, but I don't think, generally speaking, they are. So yeah, I'm not sure what Harry's going to do there. God.
Well, I suppose we should leave it there about the royal family.
Yeah.
But I did want to say, is there any particular book that you would suggest by Steiner that would help people with what we've been discussing today? Or Steiner lectures?
Yeah, I mean, there are so many lectures. One's on nature, there are lectures on just exercises for inner development. There are ones on the development of the arts and also on science in different ways. I mean, there's just so much material and history, a re-explanation of history. And what Steiner was, he illuminated the connections between different states, civilizations in history, what they did, what they brought, what their purpose was, and the redemption of them. I mean, it's all very, today we always have this stuff, people banging on about, imperialism, the evils of the empire, and all that. It's a very simplistic view, that. I mean, all the empires brought good as well as bad, and they were a stage of our evolution. And a lot of people who bang on about the empires, they might have been the ones that were imposing it, today, so the Roman Empire, it was a military thing, but that was also the basic thing of that day, and they did, but they brought a lot of stuff which was important. The Norman conquest, they also brought a lot of stuff. Then you had the British Empire. The British Empire, yeah, they did some bad stuff, but that was also of the time, and most people get all moral high horse. They say, what would you have done at that time? So it's very easy to knock it. And Western society, Western civilization can be criticized for all, like the slave trade, but also they brought all the things we use. Everything around us nearly is, technology or things that, so it's, a lot of this stuff that's going on today, which is partly bolstered by the internet, encourages shallow thinking, lazy thinking, which then metamorphoses into a sort of emotional opinion, rather than going much, much deeper into the causalities and the redemptive actions of all, you can say all of it had a purpose, all of it can be redeemed, it's all, when they talk about the Greeks, the Egyptians, the Romans,
Well, a lot of people can hide behind avatars, but I do agree with you, people are very shallow, don't go deeply into when we're doing comments or putting posts up on the internet, normally to discredit whatever we put up or something. So you don't feel like you can have a decent two-way conversation to try and discuss that with them.
No, yeah, absolutely.
And like I was saying, lots of people hide behind avatars, so they haven't got the courage to even be their true selves anyway.
Yeah. Of course, that's a double deception. I mean, the thing is, giving a human being the space to unfold what they believe and think. One of the problems is you start out saying something and immediately people jump on it because they assume you're coming from the position, but they don't, because they don't see it deeply enough. They just don't go deeply enough into it.
Well, I normally think of assumers. When I think of them, I think of the first three letters of the word. So, because assumers just are asses.
Yeah.
But you're giving a talk soon at Steiner House, and that's in May.
Yeah.
And do you want to speak about that to encourage people to come along in London?
Yeah, it's a curious subject in a way, but it's very deep as well. It's basically on insects and spiders. Well, what I mean by that, you see, if we could say that group are part of this phylum, looking at orthodox classification of what's called the arthropoda, the jointed legs, and that means and then they go into class. Here's the class insect, class insecta, class arachnida, that's the spiders. Then there is, and in that arachnid class, there are also the mites, and there are various other creatures like harvestmen, and then also in the jointed legs, there's another class, crustaceous, crabs, and all those lobsters, scorpions, all that huge area. Mainly I'll be concentrating on spiders and insects, which is huge enough as it is. I mean, because in terms of the numbers, there are, well over 3 million, and they're always adding to it. Insects, species of insect, and many, many thousands of species of spiders, and mites too. And what's interesting about them is this whole thing about threefold and fourfold. In a way, you see, you've got with the insect, you've got 3 body parts and 6 legs, adds up to 9. In the spider, you've got 2 body parts and 8 legs, which adds up to 9. So this 9-fold thing is working in, which is also by the number of the hierarchies. So mostly in the insect world, all these worlds which are now miniaturized were once on another level vast. As the Earth contracted, and this of course is quite different from the mainstream view, is that the Earth's sphere contracted and gradually and left behind concretions which became the physical planets, what we call physical planets, until it became this thing which, and then the whole solar system was something that had once been within it, was now outside it. And a lot of those creatures that were expanded energy manifestations became down into literal physical form, and that both their physical form and the internal activities and what they expressed became the creatures of the Earth. And particularly, like we see the bees on the one hand and the spiders on the other hand. You see a very interesting relationship, because both those creatures externalize aspects of their being in ways which no other creatures do. You've got the bee that externalizes wax. It creates wax from its abdomen and builds its house, and then lays its eggs in its own externalized, and it also produces honey, it's propolis and royal jelly. So it's an alchemist in a way. And a spider on the other hand is a producer of this silk, and also quite a lot of different kinds, not just one kind of silk. Some webs are built of several different kinds of silk which do slightly different things. And it's an externalization partly of its own nervous system and its skeletal-muscular system. And it sits like an ego, and it's got its body spread out, and so the whole way it works is, but it's what it has in common with the bee is this externalization. And what often spiders do, where web is used, they eat their web, to recycle it. So, and they do many, many things with it, just as the bee does, the honeybee does a lot of different things. It's a lot of activities, very structured activity. And the spider world is very varied. There are many types of web, both in design and in the substance, and many ways they're used. So, and it's, people say, Koenig talks about, we should be afraid, spiders, a lot of people are afraid of them, and we should be afraid of them. What he means by what he says is that it's because the spider has only got this twofold thingness about its, it's got this cephalothorax and abdomen, whereas the threefoldness in the insect is a more benign thing. There's something about spiders that are more awake than insects. And if you had a spider on a table and you have an insect, it depends on different kinds of insects too, but insects often, if they're walking, they just go, 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 go. And in a way, the insects are, in their heads, are asleep. They're awake in their abdomen, in their chemicals. That's what they're responding to, this tactile chemical scent and things. But they're actually not awake in the way you think of it. They're like, it's a sleepwalking thing. and whereas spiders are more awake. So if spiders sitting, if you have a spider and you move your hand, you're much more likely to get a movement from it than you would from an insect, you know, because it's so much more awake. And also they can move sideways, they can do, you know, so that makes them a bit more frightening in a way. But then again, there are some amazing, I mean, jumping spiders are beautiful. They're amazing little things. I mean, they look very beautiful. And their eyes are quite different from most insect eyes. I'm going to go into this.
Yeah, it's still going to be at your talk anyway, isn't it? Which is in May.
I'm not
I've forgotten the date now, but it's in May of 2023.
Yeah, probably in the middle of May, I think. Yeah.
But look it up on the Rudolf Steiner website.
Yeah. I mean, I'm just seeing also the whole thing about social insects, the wasps, the bees, the ants, what values. You know, that's a whole thing in itself. You know, so.
Well, bees mean a lot to me, and my name Debbie means busy bee, and I was always fascinated with them. And again, they have a lot of mythology about them, with the crowns and kings and such like.
Yeah. There's a whole mystery about the bees. They're amazing creatures, and what they do may take cosmic wisdom and change it into human warmth, really. But
And Rudolf Steiner's written lots of books on beekeeping.
He had a whole book on bees, a whole lecture. Yeah, there are quite a lot of Steiner people who've written books on bees as well. So,
So everybody, we need to be busy bees. So I'm going to finish it off there. I want to thank you very much, Patrick.
Right.
Was there any last words you had, or are you happy with that?
No, sorry. Last words.
Until next time.
Yeah.
Thank you, everybody, for listening, and thank you, Patrick.